This is the Olympic medal tally from Pyeongchang. If you watched or read about the games at all, you've probably seen this table, but there are better ways to measure Olympic success. Let's start with the medal points system created by the New York Times, which awards 4 points for a gold medal, 2 points for a silver, and 1 for a bronze to reward nations that win more golds and silvers. This yields a ranking similar to a simple medal tally, but with a little more nuance. Norway comes in first with a record 39 medals, the most by a single nation in any Winter Olympics ever, followed by Germany, Canada, the United States, and the Netherlands. But this is a very flawed ranking system because large countries have a huge advantage. The common way to compensate for this is by calculating medals per capita, or in this case medals per million people. By this measure, Liechtenstein wins first place. The nation only earned a single bronze medal, but that is more than made up for by its tiny population, which is less than 40,000 residents. Norway comes in second, followed by Switzerland, Austria, and Sweden. China, with its almost 1.4 billion people, is severely disadvantaged by this system to the point that no matter how well they perform, their score ends up rounding to zero. China is a great example of the flaw in the medals per capita system. In order to match Liechtenstein, they would have to win over 36,000 medals. So since tally and per capita rankings are both slanted in their own ways, I invented another measure, the Impressiveness-o-meter, which tries to create a balance. I made a whole video explaining the formula, but basically it functions under the theory that the more mathematically unlikely a nation's success, the more impressive it is. By this measure, Norway has been utterly dominant in the 5 Winter Games leading up to Pyeongchang, while Austria, Canada, and Germany have turned in consistently strong showings as well. This year is much the same. Norway pulls even farther ahead of the pack, followed by Canada, the Netherlands, and Germany. Austria had a relatively poor showing compared to its previous performances, while Sweden and South Korea turned in especially strong results. Now let's look at each nation's performance as compared to their average in the last 5 Winter Games. Hungary, Spain, New Zealand, and Liechtenstein lead the way because none of them won any medals in the previous 5 Winter Games. In fact, Pyeongchang marked Hungary's first winter medal ever. Belgium, Slovakia, Great Britain, and South Korea also showed great improvement, while countries like the United States, Finland, and Austria had a below-average games. Another interesting measure is to give medals won in team events increased weight according to how many participants there were on each team. For instance, a short track relay medal quadruples in value because there are 4 participants per team, and a men's hockey medal becomes 25 times more valuable because of the size of the roster. There are a lot of ways to balance the events, and it's all very subjective, but interesting nonetheless. If you compare this number to the number of athletes each nation sent, things again look different, with the Netherlands in front having won 20 medals while sending only 34 athletes. They're followed by a lot of unsurprising countries, and then in 9th, the US. Interestingly, this is one of the few ranking systems besides a simple medal tally where the US is anywhere near the top. Of course, there are a lot of factors at play besides medal count, population, and team size. It's impossible to create a unifying formula accounting for all potential factors, though people have tried, but what we can do is compare a few of them visually. For instance, when you compare each nation's total medal tally to their national GDP, where up and to the left is good, you get a group of usual suspects near the front, led by Norway. By this measure, the US and China stick out in the wrong direction. But if you compare my Impressiveness-o-meter score with the average temperature of each nation, where it's better to be up and to the right, things get more interesting. Countries like the Netherlands and South Korea start to look pretty good, as well as Italy, which won 10 medals, an impressive total considering its relatively warm climate. It seems that the farther north a nation is, the more likely it is to do well, so here is impressiveness as compared with the distance from the equator. Here, South Korea, Switzerland, and Germany start to look good. Wealth also is a major factor, so if we contrast impressiveness with GDP per capita, Canada and South Korea stand out. Note that the results here are slightly different from total medals compared to total GDP, because here both coordinates adjust for population, but in slightly different ways. And finally, the strongest trend line I could find was between medals per capita and a composite number, which incorporates both wealth and distance from the equator. At this point, the numbers are so sliced and diced, I'm not really sure what any of it means, but Norway, Switzerland, and Australia look pretty good here. Also note that by this measure, Slovenia, Slovakia, and Belarus suddenly stand out. This is interesting because countries that get most of the attention in the Winter Olympics are usually either large or wealthy or pretty far north or some combination of the three, while these nations don't rank highly in any of those categories. It's a great example of how every nation's ranking from top to bottom is entirely dependent on how you interpret the numbers. You could create a table that puts almost any nation at the top based on how you weigh factors like medals, events, athletes, team sizes, popularity, economics, climate, population, culture, national investment, training locations, coaches, and an infinite number of other variables. All this points to the obvious. The Olympics are not about numbers and country rankings, but the athletes themselves, regardless of what flag they wear. Perhaps the Olympics would be best without medal tables altogether, and the nationalistic chest beating that inevitably ensues. But what would be the fun in that?